Okay, so for super speed, I wanted to let you know beforehand, all these powers are tested at 52,447 might. I'm not wearing the escalating might neck. Base damage, like this column here, it's going to be no skill points and crits. So those 60 skill points and crits I'm not expecting to, so these are the base damage. Every attack I've done 20 times and then taken an average. And then the critical damage, this category, is with the 60 skill points into the crits, the crit damage and crit magnitude, or crit percentage and crit magnitude. And I'm specifically waiting for crits. So this is just, that's why it's so much higher, is because I'm specifically waiting until I get crits and only counting that damage, then taking an average of the critical damage. So let's kind of jump into it now. I'm going to show you why so many people are super speed and why I always tell you to be super speed, or I give the, all my guides are like, well, if you're super speed, do this, because of just of the pure damage you have on these abilities is so overpowered. So you got Vortex Trap, which you can Weapon Tap Cancel, which I'll show in the video clip. Cyclone Push, out of all the movement mode abilities, so like 1.57 or 1.75, Acrobatics, all 3. Skimming, 4 and 3 seconds. Flight is 4 and 3 seconds. Super Speed is the only movement mode that you have less than 3 seconds. Not even less than 2 seconds. And Cyclone Push and Tornado Pull. Tornado Pull also has the highest base damage out of any single target ability, I think, even in the game. You might have to correct me on the game aspect of it. Taser Pull might be higher for gadgets, but I'm pretty sure Tornado Pull has the highest base damage out of any single target ability in the entire game. And that's why you see all these perk DPS running with Tornado Pull being clipped with a weapon buff, because you don't even need a lot of might because it's got the highest base damage. If it crits, then you're still golden. You got Whirling Dervish, which is 7 ticks, 3-second cooldown, and the damage on Whirling Dervish is very high. It splits very well. Look, 3 target damage is 97, 8 target damage is 99, so it doesn't even drop off that much damage from splitting. And it's 3-second cooldown, and you can block, you can weapon tap cancel it, and you can use the dashing combos foot mod. And compared to Flight and Skimming, the swooping combo is a single target, but dashing combos is AoE. So you got an extra 13k damage per target, or not per crit, I should say. But on 3 target damage, 13k. 8 target damage is too hard to test because of the damage spread on it. But single target, an extra 13k crit, but it's going to be melee range. Cyclone Push, which is good for mid range, like for gadgets. The only drawback is that Super Speed doesn't have any range, like pure range abilities. Cyclone Push is mid-range. Vortex Trap, Dervish are going to be melee range. Tornado Pull is range, but it's only single target. Dash Attack is doesn't do any damage, but it's still 2.99, which is the same as Perfect Poise. And I'll show in the video clip, Dash Attack broke down a bit more. Speed Drain, just a 6-tick dot. That is what it is. Metallic Boost, you just get some extra healing. I think it's like 6 or 7 ticks of healing, but does no damage. It's not a practical supercharge. Not good for healing. Pheromone Bloom is still way better for an iconic supercharge than Metallic Boost, so you wouldn't use that anyway. Then that brings us down to Phase Dodge. Phase Dodge, obviously you saw a lot of change from GU32 when it was a 1-second cooldown. They made it 16.5, but it works really well with Perk DPS. Phase Dodge will clip any power, and you can weapon tap cancel or block cancel Phase Dodge. And then we go down here, Phase Dodge, base shield multiplier. So Phase Dodge is a shield. The shield duration only lasts for the amount of the Phase Dodge animation, which is about 3 seconds. So doing here, I'll show you the video clip here. Actually, that's even better. Let's jump to the video clip right now and then come back to it, because this is going to be really hard, really something that I'm not sure a lot of people don't know about. So let's jump to the video clip now. Okay, so you saw the video clip. If you still don't understand, if we jump to, so the base shield multiplier, which is basically the calculation of how much your shield can absorb, Phase Dodge is 56.64. So if I go to, these are all the tank shields, so Ice, Atomic, Earth, Fire, Rage, Iconics, Movement Mode ones, just ignore Phase Dodge there, and Miscellaneous, which you can ignore that as well. So basically, all the base shield multipliers from all the tank powers. So if I go, if we type in here, if we add up all the base shield multipliers, missed one there. So 57.23. So every tank shield in the entire game, out of every power set combined, has a multiplier of 57.23, and the phase dodge one is 56.64. So it would take you would have to stack reflection, winter ward, shatter, hibernation, density, mass density, envelop, gemstone shield with all the taps, immolation, redirected rage, Amazon deflection, hard light shield, perfect poise, dust off for both, and dash stack. You would have to stack all those shields together, and then you're slightly higher than what one phase dodge will do. And some of these, like Amazon deflection, the 30-second cooldown, these are all 30-second cooldowns. And phase dodge you can use every 16.5 seconds. So there's a reason why every tank with super speed in survival mode and using phase dodge, because you could block, Ultraman's heat vision, anything. So as long as the damage happens in that 3-second window, phase dodge can absorb astronomical amount of damage. And for some reason that's okay, because it hasn't been nerfed or talked about. So it's just, I can't even really show you how powerful it is. Like, that's the best example I could think of, is that combining every single shield in the entire game, stacking it together, is barely better than one phase dodge. So, all these shields barely better than one phase dodge, which is what you saw in the video clip too. So, it's just, that's why there's so many things going for super speed. So, the only downside, like I said, which you'll see in the video clip, Dervish is vulnerable to block. That's okay. Vortex and Dervish can be weapon tap cancel, which I'll get into in the video clip as well. The narrow cone on dashing combos, which makes sense. It's a tight weapon combo. Phase dodge can be block and weapon tap cancel, which I'll get into. The base shield multiplier, which is what I got to there as well. So even like Amazon deflection, you would think, yeah, Amazon deflection is a really strong shield. It's only 7.79. It's an 8 base shield multiplier compared to a 56 base shield multiplier. So let's kind of get into the video clip here. Okay, so with super speed, as you saw in kind of the breakdown there, obviously the damage is quite high on everything. The Whirling Dervish, there's nothing really that matches Dervish out of any of the movement mode abilities. And the funny thing, there's nothing that really matches Dervish out of like any of the power set powers. There's a reason why if you watch some of my guides or see videos on YouTube now, in terms of might DPS, you always see Dervish in the loadout or telling people to go super speed, because super speed just has a lot going for it. There's not much more else to say than that. You can make pretty much like 99% of powers. Like, I'd have to think about ones that I didn't, but you can take any might DPS power, like ice, even rage, ice, rage, nature, anything. If you put Dervish on there as a might DPS, you will have a better rotation. Doesn't matter what your power set is. If you run Dervish, you'll be doing more damage than your normal rotation. Like quantum, light, doesn't matter. Even rage, like you drop like Robot Sidekick, or I've seen rage drop drop Lacerate and run in Dervish, because Dervish does more damage than Lacerate will. The only drawback obviously is that, as you can see, it's vulnerable to block. That's the only thing, the only drawback to Dervish. It does crazy damage. You can clip with it, which I'll show you. It's just, off the charts, needs to be nerfed 100%. Don't get that question out of the way. Dervish is 100% needs to be nerfed. There's a bunch of super speed things that have to be nerfed, which is the funny thing. The reason why super speed was changed so much was phase dodge in the past and being able to clip instantly. Now they changed it to 16.25. That was back in like GU32, I think it was, and took away its clipping ability. But phase dodge is stronger now than it was ever back then. So it's just the thing with Dervish is that there's so many different things you can do. So if you just want to do Dervish, I can do dashing combos, have dashing combos, I mean by the foot mod dashing combo. So then, my dashing combos is going to be AoE, so I can do another tick of AoE damage. I can also go into Dervish and do like a weapon tap cancel and get out of it. So it's just crazy what you can do with it. So either you can leave it running the whole time, and as you can see, it does great damage. You can also cancel it right away. So Dervish cancel with the dashing combos, which doesn't interrupt anything or cost power, or just weapon tap cancel out of it. which you can't do with any other. There's no other ability in the game even that you can do that with, by the way, that you can cancel it with 2 different ways. And same thing with Vortex Trap too. So Vortex Trap, you can weapon tap cancel, which is why you see so many precision DPS, like say with the smoke bomb users, was always Vortex Trap and Dervish. So say if I just do like, you know, one-handed flip slash. So if I did it with Vortex Trap, canceled immediately. So it obviously doesn't show an example there. It should be like a Weapon Mastery combo. I just don't have Weapon Mastery Spectre right now. But, you know, Vortex Trap and Dervish add such a higher level to options available to you with precision DPS in general compared to any other movement power set or any other power. There's no power like, you know, Dervish and Vortex Trap to be able to use. And the other thing as well is that the cooldowns are so much lower. So like Tornado Pull and Cyclone Push, you got 1.75 seconds. Everything else is either 3 or 4 with all the other movement mode abilities. So this is why you see Gadget's DPS running Cyclone Push so much, because they can clip it with Turret each time because it lines up the cooldowns. And Cyclone Push would be your range damage. Oh, mid-range, sorry. Yeah, Cyclone Push is not... oh, is it mid-range? I think it's Vortex Trap range, so about 3 squares. Yeah, so Vortex Trap is range. Obviously, the rest is going to be melee. So Dervish is obviously going to be melee. Vortex Trap is going to be melee. So technically, if you're looking for like range damage, that's going to be Acrobatics with throwing knives. Superspeed doesn't have anything like that. It just has Tornado Pull. But the other advantage is to Prec DPS is that you get Phase Dodge, which can clip any powers, and you cancel it right by your weapon. And then you get Phase Dodge for tanking, which is the best tank shield by far, like by the widest margin humanly possible in the game. It's the best shield. It just only lasts 3 seconds. And then you got Tornado Pull, which for Might DPS is great, but for Prec DPS is great too, because Tornado Pull has the highest base damage and highest critical damage out of any single target ability in the game. Taser Pull might be higher. I haven't tested that recently, but that's why you see so many Prec DPS running Tornado Pull, because it's better than any of their powers. So a movement mode ability. So Superspeed as a movement mode ability has the best single target power in Tornado Pull, has the best shield in Phase Dodge, has the best clipping ability in Phase Dodge, just 16.5 seconds, has the best melee damage in Whirling Dervish. So it's like, and has 2 abilities that you can clip as a Prec DPS, Vortex Trap and Dervish, to clip your combos with, and still get a tick of might damage. And then it's got really good mid-range damage in Cyclone Push, which Cyclone Push has some awkward animations. That's why you don't see too many DPS using it normally. That's why if you can clip with it, which is why it works so well with gadgets. And then Speed Drain itself is not too bad as damage as well. In terms of Metabolic Boost, worthless, don't worry about it. But it's just from these 4 abilities. Dash Attack wasn't shown there. Dash Attack is arguably one of the best tank supercharges, because you can either get out of movement, like say during like survival mode, during like a bomb strike or meteor drop or something from Ultimate Soldier, you could just Dash Attack out of it, because Dash Attack you can block cancel it, or you can let it send you the distance wise. So if I go, I can show you here. So normally you could just block cancel Dash Attack, but you have to be in movement mode. So see it's grayed out. You have to be in movement mode to use Dash Attack. That is the only drawback to Dash Attack, is that you have to be in movement. So if you're in a raid that constantly grounds you, you may not have access to using Dash Attack. That's the only drawback to the entire ability. So then if I use Dash Attack, you know, boom, I just got all that distance covered in like half a second. So it helps you if you have to get out of AoE range. You can either block it through it and cancel with a block. You still get the shield. Or you just Dash Attack and get out of range. If you're dropping like a supercharge for like a group, like this has happened all the time in Throne. So the tank would go on the group with Throne, drop Dash Attack, the Gemini Circle, and they would Dash Attack out of range to get back in the tanking range so they can draw the ads. So it's an amazing utility power, because you can either block cancel it, or you can either use the ability, but it still frees your control effects, still gives the exact same damage prevention as Perfect Poise, 2.99 base shield multiplier. So it's just Superspeed is so far and above all the other movement modes. It's not even comparable. You could combine Flight, Skimming, and Acrobatics, all those powers together. If you had to move pool to choose from any of all those abilities to take your best 5 powers out of all the movement modes, out of all the 4, it would still be all Superspeed powers. Like Zip Tie Attack and Grapple Line Attack help for a single target, because super speed only has the one, and even cyclone tornado pull is a little awkward animation. That's why it needs to be clipped compared to like zip tie attack or grapple line. But that's it. Like unless you want single target, you have to be super speed. Super speed has so much stuff going for it. It's just ridiculous. It's got the highest damage power, the best utility power, the best utility supercharge, decent damage over time. It's got the highest base damage single target ability. So it's just ridiculous. Honestly, it's something that needs to be looked at. But the reason why I say that you should be super speed is because not only is it the fastest move in combat, it's just statistics wise, like numbers wise, there's so much stuff more going for super speed than anything else. So I'm not telling you have to be super speed to do well in the game. Obviously you can be whatever you want, but if you want to have the best opportunities available to you and the easiest access of use of powers and abilities, it's going to be super speed. It's just unfortunately what it is just super speed is just the most overpowered movement mode ever out of any of the iterations of it in the past. Okay, so to look at acrobatics, once again, everything is tested at 52,447 might, which is just a full regular set 281 gear. I've got no escalating might in my neck. The base damage here equals no skill points in the crit, so I don't have those 60 skill points spec'd. And then the crit damage is the full 60 spec'd into that. So basically, this crit damage number is I'm specifically waiting till I have a crit. And then INC is just inconclusive. So with with the acrobatic, mainly focuses around grapple line attack and zip tie attack being its usefulness. Launching roll, it has 3 single target abilities, but launching rolls is not practical for a single target ability. You'll see in the video clip here in a moment. Yes, it's got like really high damage, but it's just not practical because you have to be dead melee range for it. In terms of everything else, this is where acrobatics suffers. Acrobatics suffers. It is the only power movement mode that has a range AoE. Throwing knives is range AoE. No other movement mode power has range AoE damage, so it's nice from that. But the thing is, throwing knives doesn't even do that much damage at all. So it has range AoE, but it's not really practical at all in terms of its potential. Forward flip attack, same thing, has to be melee range. So it has to be melee range for forward flip attack. Launching roll, you have to be melee range. Back flip attack, you have to be melee range. Devastating flip, you have to be melee range. Perfect poise is nice, but it's the same thing as dash attack in terms of 2.99. Perfect poise will do obviously more damage. Dash attack does no damage, but and perfect poise you don't have to be in movement mode like where dash attack you have to be in movement mode. So perfect poise is a nice utility supercharge for that. But really, the only thing going for it is like zip tie attack has the highest critical base chance that I've tested, which is basically how often it crits. It didn't take me, when I did all this testing, each power is done 20 times and an average is taken. It crit well more times than anything else, like compared to like tornado pull or grapple line. Zip tie attack critted the most, so that's why it's still very good for single target, but it's mainly one of those things where you have to be a power set that needs single target damage, like rage or nature. That's why like every nature DPS needs to be acrobat too, because nature doesn't have any single target abilities. That's why on Gorilla you have zip tie attack and grapple line attack on Gorilla for a supercharge. But other than that, really it's just either range AoE, like range single target, or melee, like straight, like 5 feet away, 5 feet in your face melee range. And the devastating flip, same thing. It's one hit burst. Still has some nice damage, but once again, you have to be right in their face to be able to hit it with. And the other thing is devastating flip, backflip, and forward flip have a very tight spread on the damage, so you have to be very closely grouped. So a tank has to have them grouped up, because if the ads are spread out like on those 8 targets, it's not going to hit everything. You're going to miss. You're going to hit like 4 or 5 targets out of 8. But that's really what it is in acrobatics. So now let's kind of jump into the game and kind of give an example and breakdown of what the powers actually look like and talk about it a little bit more in depth. Okay, so as you saw there in the results, acrobatics is kind of on the low side for pretty much everything. Acrobatics falls into this kind of awkward category where a lot of the damage is based on melee range. Like you've got forward front flip, back flip attack, devastating flip, launching roll. Yeah, that was it. So basically what, 1, 2, 3, 4... 4 out of the attacks have to be in melee range, which is not realistic. Like if you're messing around, but if you're actually looking for like practical powers to use in raids and not just kind of messing around in like a solo or duo or something, then it's not very practical. Throwing knives is the only range AoE, and it's got a kind of an awkward conic damage to it, as well as it's on the weaker side. It really just falls into acrobatics is nice if your power set that is weak in single target. Grapple line attack and zip tie attack do great single target. Like the zip tie attack is a very nice animation. You know, it's very quick. You just throw, boom, done. Say grapple line attack, same thing. It is like the lasso animation, mesmerizing lasso. So you got very animations that are very easy to work with, very quick. But, you know, the issue is like, yeah, as you saw on the chart, launching roll is very powerful, but, you know, it doesn't do any good. You know, I have to be, what, here? No, it's still not the same. So I have to be, what, 5 feet away? Yeah, you have to be 5 feet away to use that. Same thing with, like, the backflip. You have to be right in their face, because if you say from this far away, yeah, 5 feet away, same thing. And the same thing. So if you're going to be 5 feet away from the target, then you can use those 3 abilities, but you know that's not going to be practical. You're not going to be, you know, sitting in melee range on a boss on a raid or anything like that. So launching roll, even though it does a lot of damage, is not practical whatsoever, because you're going to want something that's going to give it a bit of range, and that's where grapple and zip tie attack come in handy. Devastating flip, as you saw there, it's just one hit. It's not a dot over time. Once again, it's on the low side for the supercharges that you saw. Perfect poise. If we go back to it here, perfect poise is a nice supercharge. Does some okay damage. It's shield, you know, could freeze your control effects. Perfect poise compared to dash attack from super speed. Dash attack has the same strength. It's still 2.99 base shield multiplier. But dash attack obviously has the movement mode, so you can move quickly. You have to block cancel it. You also can't use it in movement. So perfect poise, it can be a lot more sustainable if you're tanky and need a shield. But other than that, there's not too much going for acrobatics. It is handy to have the stun and the knockback compared to super speed, which doesn't have the stun one. So if you're super speed, there's no point to take these 5, but at least acrobatics you can take it. Perfect poise is nice. Grapple line and zip tie attack is nice. Other than that, there's not too much really going for it. Like I said before, if your power set's super weak in single target damage, like say like a rage or say like nature, then yeah, acrobatics can be handy because you got 2 powers that are pure single target, because I'm not including launching roll. So it's nice from that aspect. And the other thing with acrobats is you don't have any foot mods. If I do a spare foot ones here, no, but you don't have any ones like say like swooping combos or dashing combos. You've got tumbling mastery, which is amazing, but you know any movement can take that. So there's nothing like swooping or dashing combos for acrobats to get some extra damage from it. So it's more, you know, if you like, you know, zipping around or if you like flying, like if you like that aspect of then acrobatics and super, that's great for you. But in terms of like, this is looking at the hard numbers behind the movement mode, is really, once again, if you lack a single target, then go for it. Grapple line and zip tie attack. Perfect poise is nice if you're a tank. But besides that, not too much going for acrobatics, purely looking at the numbers. Okay, so on to skimming. So the same thing, tested the exact same values, 52, 447 might, no escalating might neck. Base damage is just nothing in crits. I've done each attack 20 times and then average taken. And critical damage obviously has those 60 and 8 spect, and then INC is just inconclusive. Which just means like if it's a single target only ability, there's no point of doing single target on 3 target damage or 8 target, because it's not going to work. So in terms of skimming, it's basically a carbon copy. Everything's the same as flight. The damage values are a bit different though, in terms of what's great. So if we jump back to the summary here, so in terms of flight, the flight ones, like say whirlwind attack is the exact same thing with skimming and flight. But if I look at whirlwind attack flight 63, 64, skimming was slightly higher in each aspect in terms of its average. So same thing. So cyclone burst was skimming, but the high pressure flight variant was lower. So we got cyclonic burst 39, and then high pressure 30. So it's just, yes, flight or skimming is a carbon copy of flight, but it seems like skimming's damage is higher in each aspect compared to flight, even though it's the same abilities. But not like there's much abilities going for it, because you've got swoop attack, which is the only single target ability. But that swoop attack, you have to be you can be mid-range, but it puts you in melee range. You'll see like it's kind of like an awkward swooping animation. Same thing as like legend characters, but it's not practical to use that in a raid or even an alert, because it's going to launch you straight at the boss and do like not even subpar damage. Whirlwind attack is really the only nice one, but it's a longer animation time that you can't cancel like Vortex Trap and Whirling Dervish, so it's not as practical. The swooping combos is the foot mod, but once again, it's only for single target. And once again, it's going to launch you at the boss, just like the regular power would, so it's not as practical. Dust Off is a horribly supercharged from a practical standpoint. So the same thing. So I'm not saying that going through this video, I'm showing you the actual statistics, like the math behind the movement modes. I'm not saying like use Dust Off because it's so cool because it launches you like 500 feet in the air. Like if you want to use Dust Off because you want to fly 500 feet in the air, go for it. But if you're a tank, you get launched away from all the ads. The ads are knocked around everywhere. You do a little bit of damage, but then you've got to fly all the way back down so that you can go back to either DPSing or pull ads away. So it's just I wouldn't even call it a shield. It's just like a GTFO powered, like get the hell out of Dodge. Gale is also incredibly small damage spread. Same thing. Swoop attack also had. It took me 13 times to get swoop attack to crit once. So the crit percentage on swoop attack is incredibly low, which is the only single target ability. Dust Off does some initial damage. Same thing. You'll see in the video clip in a moment how the distance once it covers. Yes, I was talking about Gale. So Gale and Vacuum Bubble, the same thing. Barely any AoE. You have to be really grouped together for it. But that's essentially skimming. And so what I'll do is I'll go into a little bit more depth, and we'll jump into the game now. Okay, so now we have skimming. Skimming was the newest movement mode that was released. Unfortunately, they just made it a carbon ripoff of Flight. They changed some abilities around, names, and change some icons around, but really skimming is Flight. And it's even like when you look at the the mods for it, Vacuum Bubble / Gale. So it's all even the mods are shared for it. And it's a shame too because they didn't make any feats for skimming as well. Like I've never been skimming on live server. I've had no desire because I just didn't like it. I didn't like Flight. Flight was the slowest moving mode in combat. Same thing with like skimming is kind of slow as well. Where super speed was the fastest in combat, which is why you see a lot of tanks be super speed, besides the other advantages. But with skimming, there's no race feat. So what I mean by that, so if you go to like the general feats, general. So if you do the races, all these are the same as Flight. So because it's treated as skimming is aerial. So if you have all your Flight races done, if you switch to skimming, there's no other races to do. The nice thing about having separate races for Acrobats and Superspeed and Flight was that if you switch to movement modes, you get to all do the races again. You get to experience the movement mode. You get some more feats. But when skimming came out, they just made it the same as Flight, so there wasn't any races to do. So what's the point of going skimming unless you want to do like some kind of cosplay? Because there wasn't any advantages to it. So in terms of that, it's really similar to Flight in terms of its abilities. Dive Bomb, Whirlwind attacks, or Dive Bomb that's more, so Dive Bomb is like if you're here, you get enough movement, I'm not going to be able to do it in here, and then you basically you dive down at a target. So it's not going to work because I'm not here, but if you kind of look like Dive Bomb there, but essentially it's just like a knockback. It doesn't do any damage at all. It just, if you're flying up in the air and then basically diving down at a target like you would be with Flight, it's just going to knock everything back. And then Whirlwind attack, Spin Draft attack, Swoop attack, Cyclone Burst, Low Pressure, same thing. So these work off PIs just like with Flight. So it's about 10% increase in damage. So with this one, you would have to do Low Pressure first and then do Cyclonic Burst, or then do Cyclonic Burst and then Low Pressure. That's how that PI works. One has to be before the other. Launching rolls, Typhon is a breakout. It's the 18-second cooldown one, not really practical at all. And then Dust Off and Dust Off and I think it's the other one for Flight. But these are the worst supercharges in the game. They're good shields, but not practical to use whatsoever. And even Gale's supercharge has a really small cone to it. But the other issue with skimming is that it has no range damage whatsoever. So if I'm here, Spin Draft is somewhat mid-range. So that's about mid-range distance. Low pressure is mid-range. But in that, like whirlwind attack, which is the strongest with skimming, actually does some decent damage. You know, that has to be melee. Swoop attack is only single target. And then if I'm doing high pressure, or the other one, it's not high pressure, is the flight one. And if I'm doing cyclonic burst, that's mid range as well. So if you're melee range, that's fine. But you know, that's not always practical. And the other thing as well is with the foot mod for it, like with dashing combos with super speed actually does some AoE damage. It can crit nicely, but the issue is that with swooping combos, you're doing a swoop attack, so it's only single target. So even if there's 3 targets, like if I do this and then spinning and swoop attack, it's only going to hit 1 ad. Doesn't matter even if it's behind. It's only going to hit 1. So, you know, that's not always practical compared to super speed, which has dashing combos, which is AoE. So it's actually practical then. Like, yeah, if you're just doing single target, you know, you could do back to back, but the crits on swoop attack are a bit low. Plus, you know, then you're right in melee range on a boss attack, which is not very practical at all. And then dust off, just to show an example here. Obviously, the ceiling height in the League Hall here is pretty high. So if I'm going to hit dust off, boom, you know, I stopped even. So this is how it works. You deal damage to the targets that were on the ground, and you fly up in the air with a shield, like breaks you from control effects. But unless you're in some hallway that has a short roof, it's just going to be super annoying because it's going to shoot you up. You can't clip it. Obviously, in the war room, you saw that I could still go higher. Like it's not a practical supercharge at all. Yeah, it's a good shield, like, you know, stats wise. Compared to the base shield multiplier, and it does some okay damage, but it's just not practical at all unless you just want to have an effect. But you don't want yourself as a tank or a group member, but even if you shot up in the air and it did some good damage, you're out of range from like all your other abilities here, so then you have to waste time to drop back down and then start DPSing again. So it's just not practical from that standpoint. So it's skimming. Once again, it falls more into that niche category as if you want to, you know, cosplay or roleplay as skimming. But in terms of abilities, yeah, whirlwind attack is nice, but once again, it's a longer animation time and it's got to be melee. Other than that, Gale does some okay damage as well, but its crit percentage is super low and has a really tight cone on it. So, you know, ads have to be really pulled together. It can't be spread apart whatsoever. Dust off is terrible supercharge. Typhoon is not practical, 18-second cooldown, and nothing else has any kind of sustained range damage at all. It's only mid-range and melee. Okay, so flight, as you saw with skimming, it's really the same. Well, they made skimming the exact same as flight, but then they just didn't get the message about having the powers buffed. So same thing, I'm testing at 52, 447 might, no escalating might neg, base damage is no skill points and criticals. I did everything 20 times and then took an average. So it's easier to show this in the summary because it's basically flight and skimming are the exact same thing. But when you look at whirlwind attack, is the exact same thing, but you got slightly higher base damage on skimming. Cyclonic burst is the same as high pressure, so skimming's higher than that. Low pressure and downdraft. Well, downdraft and spin draft are the same thing, so they're about the same, but low pressure is lower. Low pressure for skimming, low pressure for flight, same thing. Skimming slightly higher. And then in terms of like single target abilities, swoop attack 15-410 and flight is 15-380. So it's pretty much largely about the same, except in some variations it'll be slightly higher damage. But once again, there's really not much to look at. There's absolutely no range damage. It's only mid-range damage, which you'll see in the video clip in a second here. Swoop attack is not practical at all to use for single target. Swooping combos, the foot mod is only single target. Dust off is technically stronger in flight as it is in skimming. The base shield multiplier is higher for whatever reason, but it's still not a supercharge you want to use. Like, it does some okay damage if it crits, but the thing, it launches you so high up in the air, depending on what the rate will be, or if you're in open world, it would take you multiple seconds to get back to the ads to continue DPSing, so it's going to be lower overall. Vacuum bubble is really, really a tight damage spread. I can't even use it on 8 targets. You know, I couldn't even test vacuum bubble properly in 8 targets because of how spread out they are. It's only going to hit like 1 or 2 targets. So unless you have a tank grouping the ads, you're going to miss a ton of damage on vacuum bubble compared to, like, say, like a speed drain where it's going to hit everything around it. But we'll jump back into it. So I should mention as well, high pressure and low pressure are the same with skimming and flight. They work off a PI. The PI is only about 10% damage increase, so it's not like you'd have to use high pressure and then low pressure, or you'd have to lose low pressure and then high pressure to get that PI damage, but only for 10%. The animations are long and the base damage is low anyway, so you wouldn't want to do that. Same thing I already talked about, vacuum bubble having the low crit percentage and the narrow cone to it, and the swooping combos is only foot melee. So let's jump back into the game and let's show you exactly a little bit more in detail with flight. Okay, so for flight, as we saw previously in the video with skimming, flight is the original variant of skimming. Well, it's not even a variant. Like flight obviously is the original from the beta of the game, but skimming is just basically a carbon copy. Like as you saw there, none of my icons even changed. Whirlwind is whirlwind, backdraft is spin draft, swoop attack, high pressure is cyclonic burst, low pressure is still low pressure, dust off is still dust off, vacuum bubble is gale. So they changed around a couple names. All the animations are the same. So that's, I guess, it's more a knock on skimming than it is on flight, because obviously flight was here first. Flight, the only note is that I can't really show it here, but compared to the other movement modes, flight is the slowest power in combat, which is why it's a dragged as a tank power, and which is why I don't like it personally when we are forced to swim, because obviously swimming is the same as flying in Atlantis DLC. So if you're in combat getting attacked by something, you move the slowest as flight compared to what acrobats can do, what Superspeed can do. Superspeed is the fastest. Not as a night and day difference, like not as 10, 15 seconds faster, but it's enough that you can notice it and enough that it's annoying as a tank to be in combat, just if you had to reposition yourself or anything like that. But in terms of damage, flight and skimming obviously have the exact same thing. So if you're mid-range, whirlwind attack's going to miss. Downdraft is going to hit for mid-range. Swoop attack is going to be mid-range as well, but it's single target damage, so it's not as practical. Downdraft is going to miss. Or not downdraft, high pressure. Low pressure is still going to hit for mid-range. And then everything else is going to be in the melee range. Whirlwind attack on skimming, ironically, did a little bit higher damage than the flight variant. The flight variants did a little bit lower. Or I shouldn't say variants, the flight originals did lower damage. Vacuum bubble is the same as gale, very narrow arc. So like with vacuum bubble, if I was standing like right here, I wouldn't hit the two targets on either side. I would hit the one. You'd have to stand a bit back further. So it's an awkward supercharge. And same thing with vacuum bubble and gale. Very low crit percentage. I think I had to do like 16 vacuum bubbles for it to get one crit. So it's very and that's with the full crit spec. So that's with the 20 and 40 into criticals. That's with the vacuum bubble. So it's nice on single target. If you can get it to crit, it did some nice damage, but the same thing as getting that crit is the issue. So that's more, honestly, it's more like a luck thing. But in terms of that, dust off is just very unpractical supercharge. The flight version of dust off is actually stronger than the skimming one, even though it's the same ability, same shield, same animation. It is a slightly higher base shield multiplier, but it's something you never want to use in combat anyway. Other than that, like I was flight tanking way back in the day, like 2012, just because I was fire tanking and fire didn't have a pull, so I used low pressure because it's a pull, so that was handy. But other than that, once again, numbers wise, there's no reason to be flight. Like this is more showing you how what the differences are between all the movement modes, not like what people prefer. But statistics wise, numbers wise, there's not flight doesn't really have anything going for it. It's got no single target. It's got the flight still has the same as skimming, so it has the swooping combos, and swooping combos will not be AoE. So if I do downdraft and a swoop attack, same thing, single target. So it doesn't matter if I'm standing right behind it. It's only going to be one target. Where dashing combos will supercharge, super speed are going to be AoE. So flight has very weak single target. It's got no single target abilities, or they only have to be a melee range for it. But it's not like acrobatics, which has zip tie attack and grapple line. It's not like tornado pull and super speed. So it's got no single target good abilities. It's got no good melee abilities. Whirlwind attack is okay, but long animation time, not very practical. It's got no good supercharges for damage. Vacuum bubble and gale have suffer from crit percentages. It's got no good utility supercharge like dust off because it's not practical compared to dash attack and perfect poise. So it's just one of those things where not much going for it with flight and skimming, unfortunately. Okay, so I wanted to do a quick little summary of the damage mode comparison between movement modes. Obviously, you've seen everything individually in the sections covered, and then I'll put this Excel document in the comments too so you can follow along. But in terms of base damage, launch and roll, like you saw in the video clip, yes, technically that's the highest damage out of the single target abilities, but it's not practical to use whatsoever because you got to be 2 feet away. So it's going to be tornado pull, which is much higher than everything else. Grapple line attack is the worst, but it's a second single target ability, which none of the other movement modes have. And same thing, even though launching roll had higher base damage, the critical damage is barely higher as well. And it's just 8k, like an 8k average difference from zip tie attack to tornado pull, 8k difference on the average critical. So like I said before, I did 20 criticals of tornado pull and 20 criticals of zip tie attack, and there's an 8k difference. So that's a lot. Tornado pull is just so much higher in terms of damage compared to everything else for a single target. For supercharge, it's kind of really hit or miss. I waited for a crit. I just couldn't get a crit on dust off, which is why it's low. I did dust off 20 times and couldn't get it to crit once, which is ridiculous. But in terms of this, it's really, this damage is more just how many crits. Like this parser, I may have like 5 of the hits crit, and this parser I may not have had 3 hits to crit. So it's still an average, but it's still heavily dependent on the crits. So the 3 target damage, obviously Dervish is much higher than everything else. Even Vortex Trap is higher. Whirlwind Attack, same thing. It's similar to Vortex Trap, it's just a flight variant. But still, like, you've got super speed at the top of every damage thing. 8 damage. Whirling Dervish once again, super high. Vortex Trap. Then you got the Whirlwind Attacks, then nothing close in terms of damage. Throwing Knives is the only range AoE, and that's still weak damage compared to it. But Acrobatics is the only one that has range AoE in Throwing Knives. Everything else either has range single target or is going to be melee or mid-range. So there's the summary. It didn't take a 45-minute video for me to explain why super speed is so much better than everything else, but at least now you have the numbers to prove it. Where super speed and flight and skimming have so much higher drawbacks compared to the other movement modes. Acrobatics is close, but the only thing Acrobatics has going for it is perfect poise being a lot more convenient to use, and that it has zip tie attack and grapple line attack and throwing knives if you need range AoE, but there's better ones obviously in your power sets and such. But it's just so much more going for super speed than any other ability, which is just what needs to change. Honestly, to me, super speed is way overpowered, and this is just kind of proof of the pudding. So take care, guys. Thanks.